Okay, so welcome here. Welcome into this space. Welcome to the Sovereign Man's Collective. And I am really excited to be offering this space. I've been offering it for women for several months now. And I do that twice a month, and it's always free. It's a gathering to create a space for discussion and for live coaching and for really creating a space for people to talk about things that maybe they don't have other spaces to be in that feel safe, to explore certain questions about how they were raised, what worked and what didn't. And so all of that, and just take a deeper dive maybe into self-responsibility and awareness and presence and all of the things that kind of have become maybe buzzwords, mindfulness and things like this. But this is a beautiful space, an offering to just see, like, why not? I had several men reach out that said, I see that you're offering these spaces for women. Why aren't you in like offering it for us? And so this is my offering, and it's free. It's once a month. It's always the fourth Friday. And I'm honored, really honored to be here. So thank you for being here if you're here live, or if you are here watching this recording. I am honored to share space with you today. Before we kind of get into it, I want to really quickly invite you to, if you're in a safe space, to close your eyes and take just a few deep breaths. Just in through your nose and out through your mouth. This is something that I invite each of my clients and groups as I'm sitting here and people are kind of coming in, is to become more present with the space that you're in, just being more in your body, more embodied. And then I'm going to invite you to think about feel into what's moving through you, your emotional body, even your physical body maybe, but mostly your emotional body. This is a practice that I used pre-COVID and then all during COVID, as I would facilitate different meditation groups online. And I really loved the concept of giving some space between what's moving through us and then actually how you are observing what's moving through you. So that looks like, I'll give you an example of, like, right now, there is, for me, in this space, what's moving through me right now is excitement and curiosity. So, and it can be anything. So I'm curious if you want to share in the chat what's moving through you right now. So it's not identifying like I am excited or I am nervous or I am scared, but more as there is. I'm observing that there is right now this thing, because nothing ever comes to stay. It comes and then kind of moves through us. And so it's kind of a good practice. And I like to do it here because it means we have the awareness that we are not our thoughts, we are not our feelings, but we can create some distance and observe what's moving through us, because it's always coming and going. So if you want to share. Okay. Eric says curiosity for me too. Okay, great. Anyone else joining, if you would want to share in the chat what is moving through you right now? Don't feel like you have to do that, but it's always interesting to see, like, there is what's moving through you right now. Okay. I also want to just speak to you about what your intention is for this space. When we do anything, if we are doing it with awareness or intention, it brings a completely different energy to what we're doing, because we're doing it consciously. We're doing it with an intent to show up in a certain way. And so my question for you is, why are you here? Are you curious about what this space could look like? Are you hopeful for going a little bit deeper and living from a place of more, like, I've named this group, this gathering, the Sovereign Man's Collective. And that's kind of fancy talk, maybe. I don't know, as I thought about it, but I'm like, no, I think it very succinctly defines what I'm hoping for men to understand in a deeper way about themselves, about how they move through their world in a conscious way, meaning sovereign being that a sovereign being, whether they're male or female, is someone who is one unto themselves, meaning that they think for themselves. They act in a way that isn't just reactionary, like life is happening to them and they need to react to all the things, but no, like coming back, like giving space to everything that's happening and being more intentional about how they choose to respond in any given now moment. So a person who's sovereign is thinking about these things as life is happening and experiences and circumstances and people come and go, that how they show up for themselves, a sovereign being, is how they're going to show up in relationship with people, with work, with the world. And so it is important to speak to this because I think this is probably why some of you are here. I don't know. I'm curious if you want to share in the chat why you are here, why you chose to be here. And if you are watching this, not live, watching this recording, I would love to hear from you. If you have thoughts about what we're talking today or anything at all, I would love to hear from you, what your experience is here, what it has been in your life. Okay, I want to give just a little bit of background about myself so that you understand the how I got to where I am now and why I'm someone that's thinking it's cool to gather men together to talk about sovereignty. Um, my credentials, I have a master's in clinical mental health counseling, and I spent some years in a practice and came to realize that the things that actually ended up healing me were not clinical. It wasn't talk therapy. It was more metaphysical, things that were outside of the clinical containers. And because I felt so strongly about the excitement of the freedom and the liberation I was receiving in spaces that were not so clinical, I started to lean into other modalities of healing. And that took me on the path of receiving my PhD in metaphysical sciences, which is everything that you cannot see. And as well, kind of the intersection between quantum physics and metaphysics. That's where I geek out. I love, love, love that these two things that seem very opposing are actually very in alignment if you look at them with the right lens. And that creates a lot of maybe some comfortability, because if you're left brain and very linear and pragmatic, learning about the science of quantum physics and how it functions is really cool because it's research based and it's peer reviewed and it's very supported, so that can feel more comfortable. And if you're more right brain, the metaphysical stuff, the maybe what some people would call you woo woo, it maybe, since you can't see it and you can't touch it, it's hard to define. Weaving these two perspectives together gives maybe a more holistic view of healing and of our lived experiences from both of these lenses. So I've also raised 6 children, 5 of which are men now. I have one daughter, and so um, it's interesting. I don't know. I always thought I wanted all these girls because I was raised with a lot of girls. And then I had all these boys. And I realize now what a gift that has been. I don't know that I could have raised girls like like I did boys. There's a tenderness in my heart with with men. And I think offering the space is kind of sweet for me because we were all raised in the same culture, with the same kind of overarching experience in with a kind of maybe a wounded, both masculine and feminine energy that we saw modeled by our parents and our grandparents everywhere, not just in our families, but everywhere that we were living. And that's what I want to talk about is like, how did that feel for you? What was your lived experience? And so my lived experience, having been raised in a high demand religion and having lots of children and that are men now, and now I can circle back around and talk to them about the things that I just wasn't aware of back then. And that has been really beautiful for me. So stepping into this space feels um, really right, really good. So, okay. So Truman says, I wanted to be here for you. Thank you, Truman. Eric says, I'm here to learn from you about your views on masculinity. Okay, great. Yeah, this is the discussion I want to have because everybody has their own, right? Their perception. Every person, like if we had 10 people, or I don't know how many people, watching the same movie or the same something, like even this right here, every person will walk away with a different experience of what they're watching because everyone is only ever watching it through the lens that they have from their own lived experience. So it's super cool that we are all so unique in how we show up, how we observe things, how we react or respond according to our trauma and our beliefs about the world and ourselves. So this is this is awesome to create this space for you to feel safe to share what your lived experience has been. Okay. I also want to just say the structure and the flow. So I don't want to call this an agenda for today because what I'm hoping to bring is and provide here in this container is a structure which is based in a masculine energy for the flow of things to, which is more feminine, to occur. So, with that said, my goal for today is to be here about an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes, depending, and speak and introduce some concepts that may, to some of you who've been kind of on this path, may seem familiar, and others are going to be maybe new information, but to bring more presence and clarity and sovereignty, which are the fruits, that clarity and the depth and the sovereignty are the fruits of radical self-responsibility. So when we're willing to stop asking the question, why does this keep happening to me? And really turn in and tune in and ask the question, what must I have come to believe about myself before I knew better when I was young that keeps playing out certain cycles and patterns within my life and my lived experience that is creating some suffering. So when we are more conscious, so our subconscious is 95% dictating how we believe, how we react or respond in relationship to any of our lived experiences. 95%. That's huge, which it means it's in our subconscious. So it's below conscious, our awareness, below our awareness. When we think of it that way, we're like, wait, what? What's really going on all day long? Since we are humans we are creatures of comfort. And so just that desire to cling to what feels really comfortable, whether it's dysfunctional or not, and to dismiss and avoid anything that feels uncomfortable. So we are doing this all day long, right? If it's too hot, we want to be cooler. If it's too cool, we want to be warmer. If it feels like, ooh, that's heavy, that emotion is heavy, I'm just going to avoid that. So we're doing this all day long. And just that alone takes a lot of energy. So when we can be more subconscious dominant and be aware of, oh, I can see how I'm avoiding that. Instead of turning towards that expression of myself, our emotions are energy and motion, and they are an extension of us saying, I'm feeling unseen right now, or I'm kind of angry, or I'm scared. And if we avoid that, we are literally staying disconnected from ourselves. So, um, sovereignty. I think I mentioned this a little bit. It's sovereignty is really balancing even a more healed feminine and a conscious masculine way to be in relationship with ourselves first. Because how we show up for ourselves, I don't know if you've ever heard this idea. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And that's an interesting idea. But think about it. How we show up for ourselves is the way that we're showing up in our relationships, in our work, and in our world. And that is, can you see that as any other way but true? We can't give to someone else what we haven't been willing to give to ourselves first. So I say this a lot to women, and I maybe it's different. This is why it's a beautiful discussion to have with men, because you probably had a different experience growing up. For me, what I saw modeled by my mother, my sisters, my mentors, the women that I knew in my life, and even still, we put ourselves at the back of the line. We are givers. We're giving, we're serving, and it's such a noble thing. And yet, how noble is it if we're giving from a place of lack? Because we haven't given it here first. So, what we're giving from is a place of expectation and a place of, well, put it this way, if we're ever feeling resentment when we're serving, then we know we're depleted. We're giving from an empty cup. And if I'm really honest, that's what I saw growing up. I saw women who were weary from the roles that they were expected to the hats that they were all wearing as mothers, as servers, people who were giving service in their communities, in their churches, um, everywhere. And so when I talk to women about showing up for themselves, there's kind of a glaze that comes over them because a healed feminine energy, a very yin energy, if we're going to talk about yin and yang or yang, I say yang energy, yin is feminine, and yang energy is masculine. And that yin energy, which is very unfamiliar to all of us when it's in its purest form, very whole and healed, looks like the ability to receive and be open enough to receive what's coming in, to be creative, to flow, to allow the masculine structure, if it's healed and conscious, to hold space for us in all of our expression, feminine expression of self. And there's so many levels to this, and we'll get into this. But can you see? I'm curious if you want to share in the chat what were your mothers, your aunts, your I don't know, sisters, as you've grown, depending on your age, what has been your lived experience of observing women in society? And I have to say, my lived experience is that it's been from a place of lack, a little bit of lack. And I have lived this through my whole life, putting myself at the back of the line, thinking that was, well, this is how you do it. Let me check in with myself. Am I doing it right? And I would look sideways. But is that really how we check in with ourselves? Well, oh yeah, they're doing that too. So therefore, I must be okay. So I'm curious, not just in the feminine energetics, but what about masculine energetics? What was it that you saw modeled by your parents, grandparents, or grandfathers, grandmothers, all of it, masculine and feminine, that felt maybe not so healed? Maybe like we were raised by the silent generation. We're on this cusp right now. I would say my children, I have conversations now with them about how I feel like I didn't show up fully present because I was very numbed out, because it's kind of what I saw. That was very kind of people pleasing, and perfectionism was very celebrated. I think it just is in our culture, especially Mormon cultures, maybe every culture. That was my experience. Um, so okay. And I want to bring a little bit of attention to the beautiful thing about this work, or this energetic attention, is that it isn't selfish. Like, this is the conversation that is important to have, is that each of one of us doing this work, this giving attention to ourselves, is not selfish. The world may say, oh, that's selfish. You're just spending so much time and energy like worrying about you. But actually, it feels that way because no one's ever done it. It's a radical thing. So being radical is actually a beautiful thing, because what we're doing and modeling for the next generations who are willing to watch us now is that there might be another way to show up for ourselves And through that energy and attention given here, that because it is energy, it flows out that energy of, oh, I get to love myself and tend to myself in a way that is very nourishing and so beautiful and more aligned with the frequency of our wholeness. Then we show up in everything and everyone with that energy of self-love. And when we love here, then we've given something here that now we can share with someone else. Do you see the dynamics of that? It really is energetic. Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets and mysteries of this universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Everything is energy. So I'm just going to say this for a minute. Every quantum particle and every being, every part of us and every cell, like quantum particles, they're just like the smallest particles that we've discovered so far, exists every version of ourselves. So what that means is energetically within all our particles, it's phenomenal to think about. It's kind of mind-blowing. Like Newtonian physics is old, quantum physics is what we're starting to understand and lean into. And so if you were to think of it like this span of thing, if you could open up all the energetic possibilities of who we could be energetically, they're all there and they all exist within every particle of our being, which is so freaking awesome because what that means is if where our attention goes, what we're thinking about, speaking about, feeling about, where our attention goes, our energy flows. And energy is what? Frequency, vibration. So what every word, every thought, every emotion has a vibration. And so what we're giving our attention to, energy and frequency precede material form. So if what we're thinking about, if we don't believe this, we are creator beings. We're always creating our reality by every moment, or if we're aware of it, what are we feeding our attention to that is creating the frequency of the form, the reality that I'm creating? So when you start thinking of it in terms of quantum physics, the reality that we're living right now is actually the product of what we have told ourselves it is. And that has collapsed down to our one truth. So if we are that powerful to create suffering in our lives, pay attention, we're that powerful to create just the opposite through our very thoughts and feelings about who we be. And when we start to clean up the residue of our trauma, of the things we came to believe about ourselves before we knew better than to, like as kids, we don't ask like, well, wait, I came to believe that. Is it true? Before we knew the difference between truth and fear. We were fed a lot of fear because that's how it was. So, okay, those are things I want to percolate in you. This idea that quantum physics really speaks so beautifully to the idea that we are creator beings. Whether you're aware of it or not, we're always creating something by our thoughts and our beliefs and our feelings about our thoughts and beliefs and our story. What is your narrative? We are all a walking conversation, and that is our reality. So it gives you, can you feel the freedom in the understanding that, wait a minute, if every version of me energetically lives here, then I get to choose through my thoughts, the energy that I'm giving and attention, I get to maybe level up to a higher frequency. So now I'm vibrating and sending out a signal because our reticular activation system, I'm going to geek out for just another second here before I get to the other little parts here, and then I'm going to open this up. But when I am choosing the frequency at which to think and believe, my RAS, my reticular activation system, which is a part of our brain and our subconscious is neutral. It's Switzerland. It's not judging what we tell it. So if we're saying, oh, I'm no good, I'm awful at that, it is literally sending the signal out of lack. So if we're thinking, I need that, I want that, if life is a mirror and we're reflecting out to it, what's going on in here? If there's a war in here, I promise you, there's a war out there. And if we keep saying, why does this keep happening, and not saying, wait, what's going on here? Then we keep living out the same loop. Have you ever felt that? I'm curious. Have you ever felt the loop of your life, like repeating over and over, cycles and patterns? So this is a beautiful space to start to be more self-aware, more self-responsible. And that is such a beautiful thing, because it affects your whole life. So if I start to say, well, wait, I choose a different frequency. I choose to believe that I can do this. And I actually am abundant because I am whole on if time is relative and there is no future or past. So this is more about present. So I'm going to speak to this now. When a man becomes more conscious, present, and sovereign, he becomes like stop being a victim to life and not reacting to life, but becoming an alchemist. If you study any of the ancient texts and things like even in the like some of the oldest ones are in the Vedics and in Hinduism, where they speak about alchemists. And what an alchemist does is they take what is given or what is inherited or unconsciously lived, and they choose how to respond in a different way. They choose a different way. And that's what we are becoming, alchemists of what, like when our parents give birth to us, they literally are saying, welcome to the human race. Here's your baton. And they hand us all of the generational trauma, all of the things, the patterns that played out in their lives and back and back. And it's both and. And they gave us all of their talents, all of their gifts, all of the lessons that they've learned. So we talk about generational and like an ancestral trauma and healing, but really what we focus on grows, right? If we're only focusing on, oh, this was horrible, this is what I inherited, what a heavy burden, then it will be so. But if we're like, it's both and, they were human, and I received all the gifts in that baton that they handed down to me, and I'm choosing to focus on that. And I'm willing to take the time to be more radically self-responsible, more radically self-loving and compassionate, so I can then tend to the versions of me that ever came to believe that she was unworthy of love or not capable or not safe to be authentically Noelle. And we all have our versions of what that looks like. Um, but to become more conscious, to me, and I'm curious what you might think about this, it's meaning more self-aware and more self-responsible. When I talk about presence, I mean not living in the past or the future. Can we live in, we're here in this existence with time, this time-space illusion. It's like dense and it's thick and it's really spread out. So it seems like we're on this linear path of like past and future, but I can't go live in tomorrow. Can you go live in tomorrow? Like actually there's something fun happening tomorrow that I'm actually looking forward to, but I can't go there now and go live in tomorrow. But guess what? I go there all the time in my mind. So if we are allowing, so presence looks like not allowing our painful past to inform our fearful future, two places that are illusory. And yet we live in these places all the time. So presence is in every now moment, and stay with me here, I'm going to geek out a little more. If time is relative, which we know that it is, it's hard to wrap our brains around this when we've never questioned it. But if all there ever is now, where does our power actually lie? We take back our power. We stop being victims of time, living in these two illusory states, when we choose to be present with what is actually happening right now and accepting it for what it is and alchemizing for what it is. Like, ooh, this is heavy and I'm resourced. I'm safe to trust myself to be able to sit with this emotion, to not judge the messenger as evil or bad or awful. I'm not going to project anything out anymore because now I know I am my creator of my reality. What am I choosing in every now moment who to be? I can choose love or fear in every now moment. That's my power. Okay. So that's presence. And then I want to talk about, I think we've kind of already talked about sovereignty. It's no longer being a victim to life, but realizing that, I create my reality by what I'm choosing in every now moment. That's a sovereign person. And that is beautiful. So it's this radical self-responsibility. And Alan Watts talks about, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he talks about inherent rascality, which is, he's talking about people being rebels in the way, and he says they're more like rascals. For someone to actually question the baton. I was given a baton when I was born, and here is how you need to believe and be. This is who you be. And we take it and we run around with that baton without really saying, is that true? Is that really who I be? Um, so a rascal is someone who's willing to look at the baton and get curious. Is it true that I am all the things that my parents said that I should be, or society, or whatever, the overculture? When we're willing to ask questions, not as a rebellious, defiant person, but more as someone who is willing to ask questions instead of just assume this is who I be because my everyone told me that's what I needed to be, then we're getting into the beauty of sovereignty and presence and clarity and depth. We're not in the shallow end anymore because we're willing to ask a few questions. And this is what transforms our life and our relationships and every space that we're moving through. So when a man is more conscious within his masculinity, it becomes his energy becomes more focused and potentized because he's choosing in every now moment how to be. Like, who am I? Let me see how this feels to be more present. And it's an experiment of sorts. So this path, whether you've been on it for a long time or it's kind of new, these concepts, it's so beautiful to even just have the radical self-responsibility of checking in with yourself in every now moment. If I subconsciously was choosing to believe that I should be doing this better or I'm not good enough for that or whatever, pay attention what's happening in your body when you're what your inner dialogue is eliciting for emotions and responses from your body. Is there pain in your body anywhere? What is your body saying to you through the language that it knows, which is somatic? So pay attention to your emotions, what's moving through you, what is your body expressing through pain, through discomfort, dis-ease. When we're willing to slow down and pay attention, we can learn a lot about ourselves. And this is about connection. When I first was in practice in my clinical way, um, I was trained to sit with people and like do EMDR work, like trauma work and stuff. And we talked a lot about how is this moving through you? Where do you feel that and stuff? And so I've continued this practice, but I've broken it down into a different way to be a quicker way to help people that I want to offer in this space. And it's subconscious freedom work where it's a quick way instead of taking people back to the actual experience of their trauma. It's allowing space for people to identify with the feeling, just the feeling of the experience, not to have a visual exactly of it, but actually because we have an imprint of some of our trauma, whether it's big T or little t trauma, it imprints itself. If you've ever heard of the book by Bessel van der Kolk, it's The Body Keeps the Score. And our trauma is energetic. So energy in motion is our emotions. And it has a frequency. So death is zero, right? We're not feeling anything then. Our soul has moved on out of this instrument. But just up from death at 20 hertz is shame. And shame is the lowest vibrating emotion that humans feel. And it's so heavy that we will do anything to avoid feeling that. I don't know if you've had any experience with that, but it's very real when we feel it. And it's so heavy shame, guilt, remorse, regret. We start going up the hurts. We get to anger and um, contention and all of these things, and actually self-doubt. And then we start moving up to like hope, joy, responsibility, having I don't even like the word boundaries, but just even like our noble threshold of what we're available for and what we're not. And self-regard and all of these things start to rise up in our frequency, and we can clean out the old stuff when we are willing to feel it. So, this is the work that I do. And that said, Um, I want to open up if anyone has, I can keep talking a little bit about some of the outdated, some of the expressions of extreme masculinity that men have been living in for some time. But before that, I want to say this is a space where I do live coaching. So if there are any patterns, any cycles that you feel like you've been living in, any challenges, anything that feels heavy or burdened right now, I would love to hold space for you and maybe help you get to the root of what that has felt like for you so we can help you experience a little more freedom, a little more spaciousness in your lived experience. And it's interesting as I sit with clients and even groups as I offer these spaces for women, um, there's always a different way that people respond to this work. Some people have immediate, like, oh my gosh, I feel so free, I'm liberated, I'm limitless, and it's so lovely. And other people who have had maybe more momentum, more years of the old identities playing out in their lived experience, they get a little more freedom, but that in and of itself gives enough space between it where you're like, oh my goodness, was it really true that I am not safe to show up as authentically me? Or is it really true that I'm not lovable? Is it true that when you start to question these things, they start to unravel just a little bit? And that's what I'm here for. And that's what I love to do. I feel like having raised my kids and everything, I have like a second chance at my life. And the purpose that I feel called to now is helping people have deeper emotional freedom and radical self-compassion and radical self-responsibility. So, um, so if you feel safe, I'm not saying you have to, this is our first time together, but if you feel like you would like a little bit of support in what's moving through you right now, I'm here for that. You can raise your hand or in the chat. Um, and that would be lovely. But I do want to speak to, and then I want to hear what you maybe have to say about what your lived experience is about masculinity and even the feminine energies that have been a little wonky and are starting to become more, we're a little more aware of what that can feel like to have a more healthy version of the masculine and feminine and how they are in relationship to each other as well. So these outdated models were two extremes. Either the model of masculinity that we saw was like it valued suppression, performance, and a little bit, if not maybe a lot, emotional disconnection. So this is like a perfect way to describe the silent generation. And this isn't just male, it's male and female because we have equal amounts in every single one of us has that. And so when we are more aware of, oh my goodness, I can see how that pattern, that wounded pattern, that's what I saw modeled. And so of course I am it's easy for me to go there and think that that's normal when it's always felt a little wonky, but it was familiar. So I just kind of kept living that in that space, or the rejection of masculinity altogether, which leaves men and women kind of feeling untethered, uncertain, and unclear about what is the role that is I'm supposed to play as my yin and my yang energy. So as a woman, my example is, I think I mentioned this earlier, that I saw women being very in their masculine energy, meaning they were always doing, not knowing really how to receive, a slower way to be, more aligned, with being connected to our intuition as a woman and trusting that, kind of outsourcing my power, that someone else is going to tell me how to be and who to be and what that should look like and the roles that I need, the hats that I need to wear as a woman. So I'm curious how that has felt for. So one last thing, the integration of this more healed feminine and the more conscious masculine, healed masculine, it's both and. So I used to live in a very black and white way to believe that if this is right, then that is wrong. It was very black and white. And it was so certain. I was so certain that I had all the answers. And then as I started to um, heal a little bit more and be more radically self-responsible and compassionate with myself, I started to open up to the idea that it's not just black and white, that there's so much beauty. And I used to call it the gray, like living in the gray is beautiful. I'm like, wait, what's between black and white? The whole spectrum of color. That's where that's where the beauty lies, is in the multicolored like rainbow of possibility of ways to think and believe and be. And so I feel like I've switched from I used to believe that I had all the answers, and the only thing that I do know now is that I don't know. And that feels so beautiful because then I get to feel into and trust myself, flex the muscle of my trusting myself and what resonates or not. Like, oh, let me see how that feels when I hear that. Does it resonate? Because truth, we can see it and hear it, but it's actually something that resonates because it's energetic. So if you ever notice when someone will say something and we'll look at we feel their words, but the energy behind it doesn't align and there's like some discord, we're like, that doesn't make sense. And I think that happened a lot for me when I was younger. I'm wondering what your experience was. So this integration of the feminine and masculine, it's a balancing of strength with depth, action with presence, and doing with being. So it's both and. So life doesn't need to be either or so much anymore. It can be both and. How does that feel when you think about that? Like living life from a both and place, anything's possible. So, okay. Um, Okay, anyone who would love to either share in the chat, thank you, Eli, for being here. Go, 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 help your friend. Um, I'm curious what your experience has been growing up, what you observed, how you felt about it then, or maybe how you feel about it now. Is that different? If you're willing to share, I would love to hear from you. And if you're not, you can put it in the chat and then I can speak to it. If you have any questions, we're about 45 minutes in now, and I still want to hold space here. If you're willing to kind of discuss some of these things, and if you're not, I can speak to some more things.
Well, I'll take my audio off. I have a question for you.
Yes, thank you.
Are there any role models now that you can think of that's like a healthy masculinity, healthy femininity? Like who do you feel or who do you look
Ooh.
to now where you feel like, okay, now that's a good example of someone who's integrated healthy masculinity and healthy femininity?
Okay. That's a beautiful question. It's interesting because I venture to guess that each one of us would have an answer that feels very personal to our own lived experience. So I can only speak from my lived experience, and anything that I ever share is only from this lens, right? That I've gathered through my own lived experience. But when you say that, it's interesting coming from a space where um, I didn't know that you don't know what you don't know. We are all doing the best that we can with the awareness or consciousness that we have in any given moment. So that really does speak to how you do one thing is how you do everything, because we're doing it from the awareness of where we're at that moment. So on all the layers, whether we're showing up in relationships or how we eat, our relationship to money, everything will be to the consciousness of the level we're at then. So I didn't understand growing up that I was really missing the influence or the relationship with the divine feminine. I'd only in my religion been given the experience of the divine masculine and what that should be, or what that looked like, or what that felt like. So when I started to kind of be willing to give some space, like, okay, that's that. And I gave myself permission to step into places where I was learning more about the divine feminine, like anciently, um, how that yin energy was expressed, that deep feminine wisdom stream, and be in relationship with that in a whole new way. I started to understand my femininity in a different way. And then I did notice that there were some people that I admired, and some of them you wouldn't even know because they were my mentors and they were my teachers and they were female, but also in masculine spaces too, where and I have to say, not so much, yes, maybe in presence, but more online. Some different men that I follow that have a very deep understanding of the balancing of these energies. And so there's not anyone that I could say that's like a famous person that you're going to be like, oh, yeah, I know who they are. Um, because I just haven't had enough experience in their world to say, oh, yeah, that's balanced and that feels right. But I am noticing, and maybe that's why some of you are here, there is a shift happening in this, in our world, where people are more willing now than they've ever been in all the, I don't know, generations that we've been aware of, and our ancestors and stuff, of people that are willing to step in and ask questions and be more curious about how has this actually felt for me to be raised this way, or to be told that things are just so, instead of saying, how is that actually, how has that served any of us? How has that served me? When I feel into that, what is it that I actually feel when I show up that in that energy? And those are the questions I think that are really important to ask ourselves, because I can say, oh, this is someone that has helped me, and you may have a very different experience with that, because we're all at different levels of awareness and consciousness. So what speaks to me maybe wouldn't speak to you now, but might in a few years, or as time, in the future, um, and vice versa. What you're feeling now may be something, and there's not, so the whole illusion of time and space is really beautiful if you think about it, because what it means is no one's ahead of us. No one's behind us. Like, oh yeah, I know more, or like, no, we're all at different dimensions of time right now. So when you think about this integrated masculine, feminine way to be, what would it feel like if we actually understood that every single one of us is whole? We're whole. We're already whole because there's no time. It's not like, oh, in the future, I am going to be more whole. And wholeness, let me describe, like, in Greek, the word perfect translates literally as whole. So if we are trying to be perfect and reach perfection, what we're actually seeking is wholeness, which is what we already are in a different, like now, but it's a frequency. It's not a destination. Do you understand this? This is important to understand, because the frequency of wholeness, our wholeness is our love, it's our abundance, it's who we be, it's our soul. We are not broken. Our soul is not broken. We are here having this human experience to experience the contrast of what our soul is wanting to expand into. So this life is a perfect curriculum for us to experience the opposite, the polarity, the contrast of what we're expanding into. All of our universe, all of nature, our cells, everything, look, it's always there's always a contraction before an expansion. Always. Why would we be any different? So to experience the contrast, the contraction of the very thing that we want to expand into in a fuller sense is kind of, it's designed that way. So we can look to our past, lower frequencies of time, and judge it and be like, oh, how sad, and avoid it and all that, instead of turning towards it and saying, oh, you are a version of me that was vibrating at a frequency of more lack because you didn't understand. It was before you knew better. And so, can I be the one who stays, the one who doesn't avoid, doesn't run anymore, who doesn't abandon myself? I actually stay and I hold that version of me and I allow her to feel seen, heard, and understood, which are sacred needs. But we believe that those needs need to be met out here through a relationship or a better job or more possessions, more accolades, something, more degrees. I've done it, more certifications, more, and bless that part of me that felt that she needed to do that to feel seen, heard, and understood. And it wasn't until I started to come home to all, like, to allow all the versions that have been othered by me, betrayed by me, if I'm really honest, not allowed to be felt or seen or heard or understood. If I can turn towards them and allow them to come back home to the frequency of my wholeness, I'm literally bringing them back in to the frequency of love, which they've never been separate from, but they felt othered because I wasn't willing to include them in my wholeness. You see how this works? It's energetic. When we are allowing the versions of us that we've othered to come back in, we are more whole. We are less disconnected from self. So now we're less disconnected from life, from others, from deity. So there was something else I was going to say here and I just lost it. Dang it. So I don't think that fully answers your question, Eric. I hope it gives you a little more, maybe, maybe more curiosity as to, like, I have a question for you. When you think about resonance or feeling um, things in a different way and trusting what you're feeling, can you see how learning how to flex the muscle of what you feel and what resonates can guide you back towards the frequency of your own wholeness, because you start trusting that you're safe to feel something and then discern, oh, that's not for me. Or, oh, that feels really aligned. That resonates as something true for me. Does that make sense? So when you're in relationship with anything, you're able to discern, like, oh, that feels really aligned. I love that. Yeah, I'm going to lean in there. That's a yes. Or, there's a little cognitive dissonance there. Is that a trigger that wants to be held? It's showing me. So life and circumstances and people are, like, if we can believe that life is really truly our ally and it's always sending the perfect curriculum of circumstances and people to show us where we're still not free. So if we are feeling triggered, instead of saying, well, they said that, therefore I am angry now because they said that. So they need to change how they say things to me so I can be more comfortable, so I don't get triggered. Can you see how that's backwards? Because life is neutral. It's a mirror and it's only ever mirroring what lives here. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. We're getting close to our time here, but this speaks to triggers. I love this. Thich Nhat Hanh told this story about a Buddhist priest who wanted to go out and have peaceful time meditating all alone, just in like total blissed out time and peace. So he rowed his boat out to the middle of this beautiful lake, and there he was in the middle of the lake in this little rowboat all by himself. There's no wind, it's perfect silence and stillness. And he's meditating there, and he's just like so at one with everything. It's so beautiful. And while he's there in the silence, he feels a bonk on his boat. And immediately he has this rage, this anger come up. His eyes are still closed, and his thought is, how dare that person in that boat come and disturb my peace? And with all the righteous indignation, he opens his eyes to unleash his wrath on the person in the boat that could dare come this far, and it's an empty boat. There's no one in the boat. And immediately he laughs because he has his, it's like enlightenment. He realizes, oh, it's an empty boat. That anger, I can't blame an empty boat. It just got untethered and came and hit my boat, and I'm going to blame it. That anger lives in me. So the metaphor here is, how many empty boats are we blaming for our inner discord, for our fear, for our anger, for our grief? Oh, they did that. So therefore, I am justified in feeling this way. That's backwards. If life is our ally and our perfect curriculum for helping us get back to our wholeness, the frequency of our wholeness, it's always giving us the exact perfect opportunity to be radically self-responsible and say, what must live in here that got triggered? Because it's showing me where I'm still not free. And that is not something to fear and avoid. That is a gift. It is the very gift, if you will embrace it, because it's bringing you back home to yourself, to your truest essence, which is not fear. Fear, anger, and grief are the three, and joy, four primary emotions. And I would venture to guess in the world of, in the psych world, they would say the anger isn't really a primary emotion. It's a blanket emotion that keeps us from feeling the feeling that we need to be feeling in order to become more whole. So anger is really powerful because it's always rooted in pain or hurt, but it's powerful way to keep a wall up. If we're angry and we react like this, where do people stay? They stay, there's a space, there's a wall between someone who's angry and anyone else. And unwittingly, they are creating that wall, thinking it's a protective mechanism, which it is, but it works until it doesn't work because it keeps you disconnected from others, but mostly from yourself. Because when you're triggered into anger and you're not saying, oh, what's actually really going on here? Why am I angry? Am I feeling unseen or dismissed? How can I have a healthier boundary or more space, my noble threshold? All of these questions. But when we're willing to turn towards the trigger with compassion, then we bring that part of us back home to our wholeness. So life is our ally, it's not our enemy. When we realize that we are powerful creator beings, always creating some reality, our power lies in every now moment. What will we choose? And it really comes down to love or fear. Are we going to fear that emotion that's heavy, that's coming through? In meditation circles, they call that becoming the guest house. When we are finally willing to unlock the lock on our gate of our house and open it up just enough. A guest house is a place where people come to stay and then they go. It's a guest house, allowing our emotions to come in. Maybe don't stand right here in front of me. Come sit next to me and have tea. Let's spend some time together. Let me get to know you, anger. How do you move through me? What are you trying to teach me about me and my relationship with others, and most especially myself? Fear, what are you here to teach me? Grief. Grief is the other side of love. You wouldn't be grieving something unless you had loved it at a certain point, whatever it was, a person or something you had hoped it would be and it wasn't anymore. I sit with people who've gone through divorce, whether it was them or their family in their, if they were children, and there's a lot of grief about what could have been, what they thought they were building, and then it wasn't. And that's hard sometimes because that doesn't finish. It wasn't so final. It finishes, but sometimes we cling to that idea to want to have that back in our lives. It's different than if we lose someone and they're actually gone. There's so many ways to grieve. But if we're not willing to turn towards it and get more familiar with it, so it's not so scary, then we're always going to be disconnected from parts of ourselves. So, um, thank you for coming today. I don't know if there's any more questions. It seems like there was something I was going to speak to, and then I got a little sidetracked, but I'm hoping that there was some nugget of information for you today, um, that shifted something maybe just a little bit in you, like, oh, I can see how that could be useful. I could see how that lens might bring a little more clarity, a little more depth to my life, a little more willingness to be radical, to be a rascal, and question some things about, is it true? Is it really true that I am fill in the blank? Those identities that we came to believe about ourselves as we were kids. So this primal, one last thing I'm going to say here, because this is helpful when I speak this to people. Our primal wound isn't so much about relationship with parents. Yes, it's part of the catalyst, but I think it's on purpose because as I sit with people over these years, I'm like, if you're human, this lives in you. People will be like, "Oh, I had a beautiful childhood." I'm like, "Guess what? If you're human, we all have some sort of trauma. Even if it's trauma that we can't remember because our parents were human. That even if they were wonderful and showed up most of the time, it's impossible for them to show up every time we had a need, an emotional need as a child. And mostly, if we were raised by the silent generation, they didn't have the resources or tools to know how to show up for themselves, let alone their children. So there's so much grace there, there's so much love there. But when we are young, before we even can speak, there's an unspoken agreement that parents, caregivers, if you will keep me safe, I will become whatever version I believe you want me to be in order to have this be a win-win. Do you see how that is? So really the primal wound that we are walking around with kind of unaware is self-betrayal because we are becoming a version of what we believe they want us to be in order to feel seen, heard, and understood. But there's a part of us that's not being authentic. And so there's some self-betrayal in that, but it's so subtle, but we carry that through our lives in patterns of people pleasing or even addiction, trying to connect, because we're disconnected here. So addiction really is based in the idea of wanting to feel connected to something. And so they'll do it over and over, this activity, and it's almost just enough over and over. It's like the definition of insanity, Einstein doing the same thing over and over, thinking you will receive a different solution, different end. And it never is, because what it's based in is lack. A lack of connection here creates a disconnection that now we're seeking from a place of lack, and the signal we're sending out. Maybe that's what that signal that we send out that can only attract like energy is when we're not aware of how we're functioning from these old identities that are lacking. I need this, I want this. Then what the subconscious is telling reality is, I am a person who needs, I am a person who wants because I'm lacking. I don't have enough. I need more. And so it will keep repeating to us our lack. But when we believe and start come back to the frequency of our wholeness, we realize our abundance and our love that never lived outside of us. Now the signal that automatically goes out into the ethers is one of abundance. And what does it bring back? This is quantum physics. This is not spirituality alone. This is both and. It aligns with the energy of abundance and it matches with our signal. Now the reality we're creating and living in the flow of abundance, not the pattern of lack anymore. Do you see how that works? It's quantum physics, it's metaphysics, it's all the things, it's psychology, and they're all saying the same thing. That the way back home to the frequency of our wholeness, our love and abundance, is radical self-responsibility and the courage to turn towards the versions of us that still believed they are unworthy of something, of love, of attention. And there's lack in that, but we're unaware of it because it's living in our below our awareness. So thank you for letting me geek out. Thank you for showing up here. I'm hoping that we can continue these discussions and continue to learn and grow together. I'm really excited about this, that men actually took the time and made the effort to say, well, wait, why aren't you offering these space for us? And I'm like, that's a good question. Why am I not? We were all raised in the same system. And I think more women, as I sit in these circles, not just me facilitating, but other ones as well, where other people are facilitating, there are more women than men. There are some men there, but there's more women than men. So this space that can grow and grow for me is the most beautiful thing because it means that we're all willing to actually test and say, could there be another way? Could there be another way to show up for myself that now I can show up in all of my life because I so choose in every now moment? Love, which I am, which is my wholeness. Okay. Thank you for being here. And I used to end my all of my meditation things all these years ago with by saying namaste, which is the divine. They say this in Nepal. Like when you would be walking, I went on trek once there and I was in tears a lot of the time when we would greet people because they would actually say namaste. They don't say hi, hello like we do in America. They'd say namaste. Namaste, which means the divine light in me recognizes the divine light in you, which is such a beautiful thing because we are all whole. Really, we are. And we're all walking each other back home to our wholeness. I love that. I love that idea. That's a Ram Dass quote. So thank you. I love and believe in all of you. And I'm honored to be here. Until next time. Ciao.